Prologue. The blood that remembers. Akira pressed her back against the cold stone wall as laughter echoed from the great hall. The treaty feast was in full swing, goblets clinking and voices rising in diplomatic merriment. She counted her breaths, 1, 2, 3, then slipped across the corridor as a guard turned away, her soft-soled boots making no sound on the polished floor. The temple's night air carried incense and wine, but beneath it all she caught the scent of something older. Paper, metal, secrets. She paused at the junction where 3 hallways met, tracking the patrol pattern she'd memorized over weeks of observation. The guard captain's voice boomed from the feast hall, a joke followed by thunderous laughter. Good. They would be distracted for hours yet. Sweat gathered between her shoulder blades despite the cool air. Akira moved again, keeping to the shadows where wall sconces couldn't reach. Her fingers trailed along the stone, counting doorways, until she reached the massive tapestry depicting the Steel Dragon clan's founding. She glanced over her shoulder once, then ducked behind the heavy fabric. The hidden entrance waited, a seam in the stone no wider than her palm. Akira pushed against it, feeling rough granite scrape her fingertips. She leaned close, lips nearly touching the wall, and whispered words not meant for common tongues.
Surdrak Nemar, Velknar,
The stone shuddered. A crack appeared, widening just enough for her to slip through. The passage beyond was pitch black, smelling of dust and centuries. Akira pulled a small crystal from her pocket, activating it with a tap.
Ashalun Valur.
Blue light spilled across ancient steps that spiraled down into darkness.
By blood and honor, I claim passage,
she murmured, completing the ancestral code. The stairs seemed to settle beneath her feet, accepting her presence. The descent began gradually, the temple's warmth fading with each step. Soon the passage opened to the mountainside, and the full force of the night hit her. Wind howled through the narrow cliffside path, whipping her hair across her face. Akira tucked the strands back and pulled her cloak tighter, securing the hood. The path ahead barely qualified as such, just a ribbon of stone carved into the mountain's face, in places no wider than her foot. Far below, waves crashed against jagged rocks, the sound rising and falling with the gusting wind. Akira flattened herself against the cliff wall, breathing through her teeth as a particularly violent gust threatened to tear her away. Her fingertips scraped against the rock as she inched forward. Ice had formed in patches, making the already treacherous path slick with danger. The illusions didn't help. Places where the path seemed to continue but would send her plummeting, or where it appeared to end but actually curved around the mountain's edge. She'd made this journey only twice before, each time with her father's guidance. Now, alone, every step required absolute certainty.
Show me truth,
she whispered, her voice lost to the wind. The magic of her bloodline pulsed weakly, just enough to reveal the actual path beneath the layered illusions. The effort made her temples throb. 20 minutes into the descent, her fingers had gone numb. The wind found every gap in her clothing, stealing warmth with cruel efficiency. A misstep sent loose pebbles skittering over the edge, and Akira's stomach lurched as she watched them disappear into darkness. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone, forcing her breathing to steady. A sudden draft from a hidden crevice nearly unbalanced her. Akira's hand shot out, grabbing a jutting rock. Pain lanced through her palm as sharp edges bit into flesh. Warm blood welled between her fingers, but she didn't dare release her grip until she'd stabilized her footing.
"The blood pays the way,"
she muttered, recalling her father's words. Perhaps it wasn't just metaphor. The path finally widened as it curved inward, protected somewhat from the worst of the wind. Akira paused, flexing her injured hand. Blood had already dried in the creases of her palm, dark against her skin. Ahead, the mountain seemed to swallow the path entirely, a sheer rock face with no visible opening. But Akira knew better. She approached the wall slowly, noting the almost imperceptible seam that ran floor to ceiling. As she drew closer, the rock face shimmered, the illusion thinning to reveal what lay beyond. Massive obsidian gates, veined with intricate silver patterns that seemed to shift in the dim light of her crystal. The dragon vaults of legacy. Her chest tightened at the sight. Generations of her ancestors had stood where she now stood, had performed the same ritual she was about to undertake. The significance wasn't lost on her. The wind died suddenly, as if the mountain itself held its breath. In the sudden stillness, Akira's voice rang clear as she spoke the invocation.
"I am blood of the steel, daughter of dragons, seeker of wisdom, by right of lineage, by honor of clan, by sacrifice freely given, I request entry to that which my forebears have guarded."
She pressed her bloodied palm against the central glyph, a stylized dragon curled around a flame. The silver veins in the obsidian began to glow, pulsing in time with her heartbeat. Heat spread from the glyph up her arm, not burning, but recognizing, testing. The sensation was intimate, as if the vault itself reached into her very essence to confirm her identity. Akira held perfectly still, even as the magic probed deeper, past blood and bone to the core of who she was. For a terrifying moment, she feared rejection, that the vault would find her unworthy, a pretender to her heritage. Then came acceptance. The silver light flared brilliantly, illuminating the entire cliff face. The massive doors, which no physical force could move, began to part without sound. Air rushed past her, carrying the scent of ancient paper, metal, and magic, the true breath of history. The opening revealed a corridor stretching deep into the mountain, lined with dragon-shaped sconces that kindled to life as the doors parted. Akira stepped across the threshold, feeling the weight of centuries press against her skin. Behind her, the obsidian doors closed without a whisper, sealing her inside the heart of her clan's legacy. The entrance hall stretched before Akira, silent as a held breath. Dragon-shaped sconces lined the walls, their enchanted flames casting blue-white light across shelves that reached toward the vaulted ceiling. The air here was different. Not stale, despite centuries of enclosure, but charged with preservation spells that kept dust and decay at bay. She moved forward on careful feet, acutely aware of the hollow sound each step made against the stone floor. This was not a place for haste. Ancient tomes lined the first chamber, their spines marked with symbols rather than words. Clan histories older than the current language. Glass cases held maps sketched on materials Akira couldn't identify, their edges curling against invisible constraints. She passed them with a reverent nod, continuing deeper into the repository that had served her clan since the first accord. Her hand trailed along a shelf of ceremonial weapons, daggers with handles carved from dragon bone, swords with runes etched into blades that had never dulled. The metal seemed to hum beneath her fingers, recognizing her bloodline, even through the protective glass. Akira pulled her hand back quickly. Some artifacts were better left undisturbed. At the junction of 3 corridors, she paused. The left path led to military records, the right to diplomatic treaties. She chose the center passage, narrower than the others and marked with a subtle warding spell that would disorient anyone without proper authorization. Akira felt the magic wash over her like cool water as she passed through, her status as heir granting her immunity. The temperature dropped as she descended a spiral staircase. Here the sconces were spaced farther apart, creating pools of light separated by shadows. Akira moved from one illuminated circle to the next, her footsteps echoing less as the stone gave way to a floor inlaid with sound-dampening silver. The vault's most precious treasures required silence, not by rule, but by instinct. The chamber she sought wasn't marked in any special way. A simple archway led to a room smaller than those she'd passed, with lower ceilings and walls lined with cabinets rather than shelves. This room held no artifacts of conquest or governance. Here rested the personal, journals, letters, private reflections of clan leaders and their confidants. The true history, unfiltered by official record keepers. Akira approached the 3rd cabinet on the eastern wall, her fingers finding the small indentation that released the locking mechanism. The drawer slid open on silent runners, revealing a collection of bound volumes arranged by date rather than author. She reached for the one she sought, a journal bound in crimson leather, its edges worn soft from handling. Her heart quickened as she lifted it from its resting place. The leather was warm against her palms, as if it had been recently held, though no one had entered the vaults in weeks. That was the nature of the preservation spells. They kept everything in a state of perpetual present, never truly becoming relics. Celeste's journal. Not her mother's. Akira had never found any record of her mother in these archives, as if she'd been deliberately erased, but the writings of a woman who had served as advisor to 3 steel dragon chieftains before Akira's father. A woman who had recorded not just events, but insights that seemed to speak directly to Akira's unasked questions. She closed the drawer and turned toward the passage at the chamber's rear. A tunnel carved through solid rock that led to her favorite reading spot. The observatory was technically a defensive position, designed to watch for approaching ships, but centuries of peace had transformed it into a sanctuary for contemplation. The tunnel opened onto a circular room with windows cut into the cliff face. Below, the ocean stretched to the horizon, its surface silvered by the twin moons. Stars scattered across the night sky, partially obscured by clouds driven by the same winds that had buffeted Akira on her climb down. Within these walls, however, the air was perfectly still. A window seat wrapped around the room's perimeter, cushioned with fabric that never seemed to fade. Akira settled into her usual spot, where the angle allowed her to see both moons without craning her neck. She untied her cloak but kept it draped around her shoulders, cocooning herself in its familiar weight. The journal rested in her lap, its presence almost too significant to disturb. Akira took 3 deep breaths, a centering technique Inari had taught her, then carefully opened the cover. Celeste's handwriting filled the first page, tight, precise characters that somehow conveyed more emotion than flowery script could have. No formal introduction, no date, just an immediate plunge into thought.
The burden of knowing what others cannot see is that you must decide which truths to speak and which to carry alone.
Akira's throat tightened. She ran a finger beneath the line, feeling the indentation where Celeste's pen had pressed into the paper. Even through centuries and preservation spells, the force of the writer's conviction remained. She turned the page, skipping ahead to passages she'd read before, but returned too often.
Today I watched the heir struggle with her ceremonial sword. The weight is wrong for her frame, but tradition insists on this specific blade. Tradition would rather see her strain than succeed with a weapon that suits her nature. I said nothing, though my silence felt like betrayal.
Akira's shoulders tensed involuntarily. She'd experienced the same, training with weapons designed for bodies larger than hers, being told adaptation was weakness rather than wisdom. Reading Celeste's observations made her feel less alone in that struggle, separated though they were by generations. The journal detailed council meetings where Celeste had bitten her tongue, diplomatic functions where she'd noticed undercurrents others missed, private moments of doubt about decisions made in the clan's name. Through it all ran a current of fierce protection for the Steel Dragon legacy, coupled with quiet rebellion against its rigidity. Akira flipped forward to a section marked with a pressed flower, long dried but still recognizable as mountain aster.
There is a difference between honoring ancestors and being imprisoned by them. The former strengthens us with wisdom, the latter weakens us with fear of change. I believe our greatest loyalty to those who came before is to ensure their sacrifices purchased a future worth having, not a past endlessly repeated.
Her chest expanded on a deep inhale. These words, more than any others, had called to her since she first discovered the journal. They gave voice to the tension she felt daily, the pull between duty and possibility, between reverence and progress. Outside, clouds parted to reveal the larger of the twin moons in full. Its light poured through the observatory windows, illuminating the page with silver clarity. Akira turned to the final entry she always read during these secret visits.
I write this knowing my time as advisor ends soon. My body fails where my mind remains sharp, perhaps the cruelest arrangement. I wonder what will become of these words. Will they gather dust or find eyes that recognize their value? I have no children to inherit my thoughts, but perhaps blood is not the only path of legacy. Perhaps someday someone will read these pages and know they are not alone in questioning. In that possibility, I find peace.
Akira closed her eyes, the journal held against her chest. The pressure there wasn't pain, but fullness, an emotion too complex to name. She had never met Celeste, never heard her voice or seen her face, yet felt connected to her in ways that transcended ordinary kinship. In the silence of the observatory, with moonlight painting silver patterns across the stone floor, Akira allowed herself to acknowledge what drew her repeatedly to these writings. The desperate hope that she too might be understood someday. that her questions and doubts might be recognized not as weakness, but as necessary evolution. She opened the journal again, turning to a section she hadn't explored before. The handwriting here was less controlled, as if written in haste or strong emotion.
The old magic runs deeper than they know. Blood calls to blood across generations. What we bury does not disappear, it waits.
Akira's fingers stilled on the page. These words felt different, not philosophical musings but warning or promise. She couldn't tell which, and that uncertainty sent a shiver across her skin despite the room's comfortable temperature. Before she could read further, a subtle shift in the air made her look up sharply. She wasn't alone anymore. A shimmer rippled through the air, subtle like heat rising from stone, and Akira snapped the journal shut. She didn't need to look up to know who had found her. Only one person could navigate the vault's protections as easily as breathing. Anari materialized near the doorway, her tall frame silhouetted against the passage darkness. The high cleric's face remained impassive, but her eyes held a mixture of affection and rebuke that Akira had known since childhood.
"The treaty feast continues above,"
Anari said, her voice carrying the particular resonance of someone who had spent decades in sacred spaces.
"Your absence has been noted."
Akira's fingers tightened around the crimson journal.
By whom?
"Those who matter."
Anari moved into the observatory, her robes making no sound against the stone floor. She settled across from Akira in the window seat, arranging herself with the precise economy of movement that had always made Akira feel ungainly by comparison.
"The feast will conclude without incident. I've ensured your father knows you needed solitude."
The tension in Akira's shoulders eased slightly. Her father would understand. He'd made similar escapes in his youth, as he'd once confided during a rare moment of openness. Anari's gaze dropped to the journal.
"Always the same one,"
she observed. Not a question, but Akira felt compelled to answer anyway.
Celeste understood things others didn't see.
She traced the worn edge of the cover with her thumb.
Or wouldn't acknowledge.
"And what do you understand, little Zarvinari, that brings you here instead of to your duties?"
Akira's jaw tightened at the childhood nickname.
My duties were to smile and nod while diplomats spoke over me, to be decorative.
The bitterness in her voice surprised her. Anari's expression didn't change, but something in her posture softened.
"Is that what you believe Aradin asks of you?"
No.
Akira admitted, looking out at the moons reflected on the dark water below.
But it's what others expect.
Silence filled the space between them, not uncomfortable but weighted with unspoken understanding. Outside, clouds drifted across the larger moon, momentarily dimming the silver light that streamed through the windows.
"Why do you return to Celeste's words?"
Anari finally asked.
"There are hundreds of journals in the archives, records from every era of our clan's history."
Akira's throat tightened. The real answer felt too raw to speak aloud, but Anari had always seen through half-truths.
She writes about questions I haven't found answers to anywhere else.
"Such as?"
How to honor tradition without being suffocated by it.
Akira opened the journal to a page she knew by heart.
How to stand in the shadow of greatness without disappearing entirely.
"And you find no guidance on these matters from the living?"
There was no accusation in Anari's tone, only gentle inquiry. Akira's gaze flicked up to meet the cleric's.
The living are not always honest about their doubts.
A faint smile touched Anari's lips.
A fair observation.
She extended her hand, palm up.
May I?
After a moment's hesitation, Akira passed the journal to her. Anari handled it with reverence, opening to a random page and scanning the contents. Her expression remained neutral, but Akira noticed a subtle change in her breathing. A slight catch that suggested recognition.
You seek your mother in these pages,
Anari said softly. The statement struck with painful accuracy. Akira's stomach tightened and she pulled her cloak closer, despite the room's comfortable temperature.
I seek anyone who might have known her, anyone who might explain why every record of her has been erased.
not erased,
Anari corrected.
protected.
Akira leaned forward.
From what?
Anari closed the journal, resting her weathered hands atop it.
There are memories that live in the blood, Akira, knowledge that passes from mother to daughter, whether spoken aloud or not. Your soul carries more than you know.
That's not an answer.
It's the only one I can give tonight.
Anari's gaze was compassionate but unyielding.
Some truths must be earned through living, not discovered through reading.
Frustration coiled in Akira's chest, always the same, hints and partial revelations, never the full story. She turned toward the window, watching clouds race across the night sky.
I dream of places I've never seen.
She said after a long pause.
I know songs I've never been taught.
Anari nodded, unsurprised.
The steel dragon line runs deep. Your inheritance is more than title or position.
Then why am I kept from so much of it?
The question emerged sharper than Akira intended.
Not kept from,
Anari said.
prepared for. There is a difference.
The high cleric reached into her robes and withdrew a small object wrapped in silk. She placed it on the seat between them and carefully unfolded the fabric to reveal a stone disc no larger than a coin, etched with symbols older than the clan itself.
A safer passage
Anari explained.
for your return tonight and future journeys.
Akira stared at the disc.
You knew I would come here.
I know you, Akira.
The simple statement carried layers of meaning.
Just as I knew Celeste, just as I knew others who asked the questions you now ask.
Did you give them answers?
I gave them what they needed.
Anari rewrapped the disc and pressed it into Akira's palm.
Sometimes that was silence, sometimes guidance, always truth, even when partial.
Akira's fingers closed around the gift. The stone was warm against her skin, as if it had absorbed Anari's body heat, or perhaps carried its own inner fire.
The journal records what was written.
Anari said, rising to her feet with fluid grace.
Your task is to discover what was lived.
She gestured toward the pages that had so captivated Akira.
Legacy is not ink on paper. It is breath in lungs, blood in veins, choices made when no path seems clear.
The high cleric moved toward the passage entrance, her form already beginning to shimmer with the same distortion that had announced her arrival.
Ashe drakanu urum ka.
She intoned, "Sacred breath of the dragons, watch over you." The blessing carried weight beyond ceremony. It carried memory.
And yours?
Akira replied, her voice rich with quiet sincerity. Before she disappeared completely, she turned back, her eyes reflecting the moonlight with unusual brightness.
Neval drak su urden maker Vashti,
she intoned, an ancient blessing rarely spoken outside formal ceremonies. May your soul recognize its own song. Then she was gone, leaving only a lingering scent of temple incense and the faintest disturbance in the air. Akira sat motionless, the stone disk warming in her hand while Celeste's journal rested in her lap. The twin moons had fully emerged from behind the clouds, casting silver light across her face and the floor of the observatory. In the distance, waves broke against the base of the cliff, their rhythm steady and unchanged for centuries. She opened the journal again, but didn't immediately read. Instead, she placed her palm flat against an empty page, as if she might absorb its contents through touch alone. What had Anari meant about memories living in the blood? About her soul caring more than she knew? The disk pulsed once against her other palm, a gentle reminder of its presence. Akira lifted it to examine the etched symbols more closely. They weren't familiar clan markings. These were older, reminiscent of the runic pattern she'd seen in the most ancient sections of the temple archives. She returned her attention to Celeste's journal, turning to the passage she'd been reading when Anari arrived.
The old magic runs deeper than they know. Blood calls to blood across generations. What we bury does not disappear, it waits.
A shiver ran across Akira's skin that had nothing to do with cold. The similarity between these words and Anari's couldn't be coincidence. Her chest tightened with the certainty that she stood at the edge of something vast and significant. A truth not yet named, but already unfolding. In the silvered quiet of the observatory, surrounded by ancient stone and secrets, Akira felt the weight of history pressing against her, not as burden, but as presence. Her soul was indeed a vessel, not empty and waiting to be filled, but already carrying echoes of those who had come before. Not yet fully understood, but undeniably hers.